felt sadness turn into something heavier than sadness. The original feeling arrives clean, moves through, and should complete its arc within minutes. Instead, it stays. Days turn to weeks, weeks turn to months. What started as emotion becomes identity. I am a sad person becomes the story you tell yourself, the story others tell about you, the story that hardens into what feels like permanent truth. This happens through a specific mechanism. That mechanism can be dismantled. What I'm going to show you tonight draws from traditions that specialized in emotional transformation rather than emotional suppression. The tantric path, the Kashmir Shaivism understanding of consciousness, the Tamil Siddha approach to the body as laboratory for awakening. These lineages developed precise methods for working with difficult emotions. Methods you can use tonight. The title makes a bold claim. Sadness will never come again. Before this hour ends, you'll understand exactly what that means and what it doesn't mean. You'll have 5 practical techniques. You'll understand why fighting sadness makes it worse. And you'll see the difference between sadness as clean information and sadness as chronic suffering. I think this will interest you because the approach challenges everything you've been taught about emotional management. Where other paths say transcend emotions by rising above them, Tantra says go directly through them. Where renunciation says withdraw from what causes feeling, Tantra says embrace it completely. Where suppression says control through discipline, Tantra says release control and let energy complete its natural arc. The research validates what practitioners have known through direct experience for millennia. Tantric practitioners show unique brainwave patterns, sustained high-amplitude gamma oscillations at 40 Hz and above, associated with heightened presence and profound well-being. Their breathwork activates parasympathetic nervous system response, flooding the body with oxytocin, serotonin, endogenous opioids. These are measurable biochemical shifts. The bliss you'll learn to access tonight can be generated through specific mechanisms that anyone can learn. To keep this accessible, I'll use English for the concepts we're covering. When I reference a concept from specialized vocabulary, I'll give you its meaning immediately so nothing creates a barrier to understanding. The goal is transmission, and transmission requires clarity. We're going to map this out for you, step by step, with all the details. Bear with us. The word emotion comes from the Latin mova, meaning to move, with the prefix e meaning out. Emotion equals energy moving outward. That's the literal meaning embedded in the language itself. Sadness is energy in motion. Joy is energy in motion. Fear, anger, grief, ecstasy, all of them are the same fundamental life force expressing through different frequencies, different textures, different movements. The tantric traditions understood this directly. In Kashmir Shaivism, all experience is the creative power of consciousness itself taking form. Your sadness is that creative power wearing a particular shape. Your joy is the same power wearing another shape. Both are equally divine because both are consciousness expressing. The problem is what happens to energy when it gets trapped instead of moving. Emotion arises in the body as sensation. Heaviness in the chest, pressure behind the eyes, contraction in the throat. Before thought names it, before story attaches to it, there's pure energetic experience. This phase lasts perhaps 90 seconds in neurological terms. 90 seconds of raw feeling, energy moving, sensation pulsing. And then either the energy completes its circuit and dissipates naturally, or something interferes. What interferes is the story. The thinking mind enters with narrative. Why do I feel this way? What does this mean about my life? When will this stop? What if it never stops? Will I always feel this way? The story adds layers of mental content onto the raw sensation. Each layer interrupts the natural completion cycle. The energy gets trapped, unable to move, locked in place by the narrative wrapped around it. This trapped energy is suffering. The original sensation was clean information. The trapping creates the chronic condition. Think about what I just said. Don't let that fly over your head. Pain and suffering are two completely different phenomena. Pain is clean information from the system. Something happened. Energy is moving in response. Sensation arises. Suffering is the mental elaboration, the endless theater of interpretation, the story that claims permanent ownership of an experience that was designed to pass through. Every contemplative tradition has noted this distinction. A Buddhist teaching about 2 arrows points to exactly this mechanism. The first arrow is the event. Something happens that causes pain. The second arrow is what you do about it in your mind. The second arrow causes far more damage than the first because the second arrow is self-inflicted and self-perpetuating. You can shoot the second arrow at yourself 10,000 times for every single first arrow that life delivers. The tantric approach takes this further, where other paths would teach you to stop shooting the second arrow through discipline, through disengaging from the story. Tantra says meet the energy so completely that the story can't form in the first place. Go into the sensation so fully that there's no separation between you and the experience. In that complete meeting, something alchemical occurs. The energy transforms. What began as heaviness becomes spaciousness. What began as contraction becomes release. What began as sadness reveals itself as raw life force that was never sad at all, just temporarily taking that shape. This teaching threatens everything you've been taught about emotional management. The modern approach to sadness is fundamentally combative. Fight it, fix it, overcome it, get past it, move beyond it. The language itself reveals the orientation. All of these phrases assume sadness is an enemy to be defeated, an obstacle to be removed, a problem to be solved. Notice what happens when you approach sadness as enemy. Resistance arises. The body tenses against the experience. The mind mobilizes strategies of avoidance. Energy goes into fighting rather than feeling, and the sadness paradoxically intensifies. The resistance adds another layer of contraction to the original contraction. You're suffering about the suffering. The spiral deepens. What you resist persists. Neurological research confirms what the traditions understood. When you suppress an emotion, you push it below conscious attention, where it continues operating outside your capacity to work with it. Research on expressive suppression shows that suppressing emotional expression increases physiological arousal rather than decreasing it. Your heart rate elevates. Stress hormones flood the bloodstream. The body bears the burden of what the mind refuses to acknowledge. Years of this create pathology. Chronic pain conditions, digestive disorders, autoimmune responses all correlate significantly with emotional suppression patterns. The body keeps the score, as the trauma researchers say. The unfelt grief lodges in the tissues. The swallowed anger manifests as inflammation. The avoided sadness finds expression through symptoms that seem to have no cause because the cause was pushed out of attention decades ago. Tantra understood this thousands of years before Western psychology began to understand it. The teaching was precise. Renunciation starves nothing. Suppression is itself an action that leaves deeper marks than what you suppress. Only full experience met with complete presence burns the pattern clean. Life-denying paths create what they claim to escape. If you've been watching this channel for a while, if the content serves your path, take a moment now to subscribe if you haven't already. Leave a comment about your own experience with sadness, what you've tried, what hasn't worked, what questions remain. The tantric principle flips the entire orientation. Welcoming sadness removes the resistance that was trapping the energy in the first place. Without resistance, the energy moves. When energy moves, it completes its natural cycle. When the cycle completes, the sadness dissolves on its own. No fighting required. No fixing necessary. The system knows how to heal itself when you stop interfering. Welcoming requires specificity. You don't welcome the story about the sadness. You don't invite more mental elaboration. You welcome the raw sensation in the body where the sadness lives, the heaviness, the ache, the pressure, the density, whatever physical form the energy is taking in this moment. Attention goes directly there, into the body, into the feeling, away from the meaning. This is where the tantric path diverges from talk therapy and cognitive approaches. Those methods work with the story. They analyze the narrative, find patterns in the plot, reframe the interpretation. Sometimes that helps. The energy remains lodged in the body regardless of what new story you wrap around it. You can understand perfectly why you're sad and still feel the sadness with the same intensity. Understanding doesn't discharge the trapped energy. Feeling does. There's a practitioner story from the Tamil Siddha tradition that captures this. A student approached one of the accomplished ones and said, I've meditated for 20 years and the grief from my mother's death still arises. The teacher asked, when the grief arises, where do you put your attention? The student replied, I observe it with detachment. I watch it without identifying with it. The teacher shook his head. That's why it persists. You're maintaining separation between yourself and the experience. The experience needs to be met completely, without any witness standing apart. Become the grief. Let there be no one experiencing it, only grief griefing. Then we'll see what remains. The student tried it. He stopped observing and started being. Let the boundary between himself and the emotion dissolve entirely. In that complete merger, something shifted. The grief intensified momentarily, then released in a wave that left him trembling. When the wave passed, a stillness remained that felt like spaciousness where weight used to be. The teacher smiled. Now you understand why we embrace rather than renounce. What you resist owns you. What you completely accept dissolves. Bliss, as the tantric traditions understand it, describes the fundamental nature of consciousness itself, your inherent aliveness before any experience colors it. Bliss, called Ananda in the original language, points to what you are at the deepest level. It's the ground on which all states arise and pass, present even when other emotions move through. When the ancient texts describe existence, consciousness, bliss as the three qualities of ultimate reality, they're describing what reality is right now, what you are right now, what never changes regardless of what emotional weather passes through. Bliss is the baseline. Sadness is the weather. The weather doesn't alter the space it passes through. Storms don't fundamentally change the nature of the openness they move through. This reframe matters because it shows why fighting sadness has never worked and will never work. The bliss you're seeking is already present. The sadness doesn't obstruct it. The only obstruction is your relationship to the sadness, specifically your belief that the sadness blocks access to the bliss. That belief creates the resistance. The resistance creates the trapping. The trapping creates the suffering. Remove the belief, remove the resistance, remove the trapping, and you discover that sadness was arising in bliss all along. They were never in opposition. The Vijnana Bhairava Tantra, one of the primary source texts for these teachings, puts it directly. Whatever sensation occurs, even ordinary unhappiness, if you do allow it to flow through you completely, you will experience that through which all experience occurs. That through which all experience occurs is consciousness itself, which has the nature of bliss. The teaching asks you to stop obstructing your seeing of the bliss that's already the nature of the knowing presence that you are. We're about to get into the practical side of this. 5 specific methods. Each one can be practiced tonight. Each one will produce observable effects. Hang tight. The tantric traditions developed precise methods for this transformation. What I'm about to share draws from practices refined over centuries by practitioners who specialized in emotional alchemy. These are verified technologies that work when applied correctly. The first method is conscious energy breathing. Breath is the primary lever for shifting emotional states. Every tradition understood this. The tantric schools developed it with particular precision because breath, unlike thought, can be directly controlled. You can't decide to stop thinking negative thoughts. The decision itself is a thought. You can directly alter how you breathe, and the breath changes everything else in response. When sadness is present, the breathing pattern has specific characteristics. Shallow inhalation, often restricted to the upper chest. Incomplete exhalation, with residual air trapped in the lungs. Sighing as the body attempts to discharge energy it can't release through normal respiration. Breath holding without attention, creating pressure that intensifies the emotional compression. The practice reverses each of these patterns. Take a deep inhalation now, imagining the breath as golden light entering through the crown of your head. Let this light fill the entire cavity of your body, the lungs, the belly, the pelvis, the limbs. Hold briefly at the top of the breath, with fullness rather than strain. Then exhale slowly, allowing any heaviness, any darkness, any stale energy to release through the root of your body, downward into the earth. The inhalation draws in fresh life force. The exhalation releases accumulated density. The breath oxygenates tissues that emotional contraction has depleted. It stimulates the vagus nerve, which directly triggers parasympathetic response. It engages the diaphragm, which massages the organs and releases fascial tension, where emotion often lodges. 21 repetitions of this breath creates measurable shift in neurochemistry. The endorphin release is quantifiable. The cortisol reduction shows up in saliva tests. The practice works because the body responds to specific inputs with specific outputs. You with me? The second method is conscious transmutation of the feeling itself. This goes beyond breathing into direct work with the emotional energy. When sadness arises, you sit with it consciously rather than suppressing or indulging. Full presence, full permission, no agenda. Find where the sadness lives in your body. Is it in the chest, the throat, the belly, behind the eyes? Then breathe directly into that location, into it, through it, as if the breath could penetrate the density of the feeling itself. Then ask the feeling what it wants you to know. Emotions carry information. They're signaling systems with intelligence behind them. Sadness often signals unprocessed grief, unfulfilled longing, transition between life phases, or the need for rest and withdrawal that busy life has prevented. When you ask the emotion what it's communicating, something often responds. An image arises. A memory surfaces. A knowing arrives that has nothing to do with thinking. That knowing contains information about what you've been avoiding, what you need, what life is asking from you. Polyvagal research confirms what the traditions understood. Staying with difficult emotions while maintaining physiological safety, specifically through breath and ground contact, rewires the nervous system's response patterns. Each time you successfully ride through an emotional wave without drowning or running, the nervous system registers that it survived. The next wave becomes slightly less threatening. Over time, the baseline shifts. What once felt overwhelming becomes workable. What once triggered panic becomes sensation moving through. The third method cultivates everyday bliss deliberately. Tantra rejected the idea that pleasure leads to suffering. Only attachment to pleasure causes suffering. Pleasure itself is consciousness delighting in its own manifestation. When you taste food with full attention, consciousness is tasting itself in that form. When warm water runs over your skin in the shower and you're fully present to the sensation, consciousness is touching itself, knowing itself as both toucher and touched. The practice is deliberate cultivation of ordinary pleasure through presence. Eat slowly enough to taste. Feel the texture of cloth against skin. Notice sunlight warming your face and give it full attention rather than taking it as background while the mind pursues its endless commentary. This trains the nervous system to see life as inherently pleasurable as a baseline condition regardless of circumstance. The baseline shifts from neutral to negative toward neutral to positive. Neuroplasticity research confirms that consistent pleasure awareness literally rewires reward circuitry. You're training the brain to find the good that was always present, previously filtered out by attention fixated elsewhere. The fourth method uses relationship as spiritual practice. This is distinctly tantric, where renunciate paths withdrew from relationship to find liberation. Tantra dove into relationship as the fastest path to seeing what you are. Other humans trigger you like nothing else can. Intimacy, emotional and physical, offers direct access to the experience of union the traditions describe. When you maintain deep eye contact with another human being, something happens that words can't fully capture. The usual boundaries between self and other blur. The sense of being a separate entity softens. Something is shared that doesn't belong to either person, passes between them as pure connection. The practice is conscious co-regulation. When distressed, bring your nervous system into proximity with a regulated nervous system, rather than withdrawing into isolation where the story can spin without interruption. Synchronize breathing with your partner. Maintain physical contact, hand on chest, embrace, any form that maintains connection. The regulated system entrains the dysregulated system. Heart rhythms synchronize. Brainwave patterns align. Stress hormones in both bodies decrease simultaneously. Attachment research demonstrates that co-regulation is the most powerful antidote to depression and anxiety that exists. The infant learns to regulate emotion through contact with regulated caregivers. The adult with secure attachment uses relationship the same way. Isolation intensifies suffering. Connection interrupts the suffering loop because connection reminds the nervous system that safety exists, that aloneness is temporary, that the threat creating the contraction can be processed in contact with another. The fifth method is the most advanced and the most direct. It requires no technique because it bypasses technique entirely. In meditation, you rest in the knowing presence itself, the open attention that receives all experience without being defined by any experience. From this space, you notice the natural quality of aliveness that pervades experience. Before you name any sensation, before you categorize any feeling, there's raw vibrancy. Just being here has a quality. That quality is what the traditions call bliss, the inherent aliveness of presence when mental clutter settles. This is what the Vajrayana teachings call the Great Seal. Emptiness and bliss are discovered to be one thing. The knowing presence has no substance, no location, no boundary. It's empty in that sense. Yet it's self-luminous, self-knowing, inherently vibrant. It's blissful in that sense. The emptiness is the bliss. The bliss is the emptiness. They were one thing all along. From this seeing, sadness appears differently. It's still sadness. The sensation still has its texture. It's arising in something that doesn't share its qualities. Sadness is dense. Presence is spacious. Sadness is contracted. Presence is open. Sadness is heavy. Presence is weightless. You discover that you're more like the open space than like the weather passing through. The sadness transforms. You remain. We've covered a lot of territory, and if this content is landing, if something in these teachings is clicking, take a second to tap the like button. Drop a comment with your insights so far, with questions that are arising, with whatever wants to be shared. I need to address the title directly. Sadness will never come again. If that's understood literally, as a promise that the emotion of sadness will never arise in your experience, the claim is false and dangerous. Anyone promising you the elimination of an entire category of human emotion is either lying or selling something. Sadness will arise. Grief will visit. Loss will be felt. These are built into the architecture of human experience. Any teaching that promises otherwise is spiritual bypassing dressed up as liberation. There's another way to hear the claim. Sadness as you have known it, sadness as chronic suffering, sadness as identity, sadness as a problem that needs solving rather than an experience that needs feeling, that sadness ends. The transformation comes through changed relationship to it. The sadness that never comes again is the second arrow. The suffering about the suffering, the story about the sensation, the resistance that traps what would otherwise pass through. When that structure dissolves, sadness becomes workable. It arises. You feel it fully. It completes its movement. It dissolves. The whole cycle might take minutes rather than months or years. No residue remains. No trauma accumulates. No story gets added to the collection of stories about how you've been hurt. Life becomes remarkably clean when emotion is allowed to move without interference. The tantric sage allows sadness to pass through like a storm moving across open space. The space remains untouched. You are that space. That's what the title points toward. That's what becomes verifiable through practice. The deeper teaching beneath all 5 methods is seeing clearly. What's feeling the sadness? If you look directly at this question without answering from memory, without repeating what you've been told, what do you find? There's sadness. That much is clear. The sensation is present. What's receiving the experience? What's the open attention in which the sadness appears? You can't find it as an object because it's always the subject. It's what's looking, always looking, the looker that can't be looked at. It's the presence in which all experiences arise, the space that holds everything appearing within it. When you turn attention toward it directly, you don't find any qualities that match the sadness. The witnessing presence has no sadness. It has no happiness. It has no age, no gender, no wounds, no healing. It's prior to all those qualities. It's what knows them without being defined by them. This is the seeing that Tantra points toward through every practice, every technique, every method. The practices prepare the nervous system, clear the channels, reduce the density of accumulated emotion, so the seeing can happen more easily. The seeing itself arises spontaneously when conditions are right. The seeing is of what was always already the case, what can never fail to be the case, what you've never for a single moment been separate from. You are the one who receives sadness without becoming sad at the deepest level. You are the open space in which sadness occasionally appears. That space has the nature of knowing presence. Knowing presence has the nature of open, luminous, contentless aliveness. That aliveness is what the traditions call bliss, the inherent vibrancy of being itself. When this is seen even briefly, the relationship to emotion shifts permanently. Sadness can still arise. It's arising in the you that you now see yourself to be, which functions through personality, rests as the open attention in which personality appears. The personality continues to have its reactions, its preferences, its patterns. Something has stepped back far enough to see that person from a different angle. And from that angle, what the person experiences no longer has the power to define what you are. You get it? I'm going to guide you through a combined method that draws from the 5 approaches we've discussed. This takes about 15 minutes. You can do it right now if you're in a position to close your eyes, or you can save it for later when you have privacy and stillness. Do it tonight. The difference between concept and realization is practice. Find a position where your spine can be relatively straight without strain. Sitting is ideal. Lying down works if you can stay awake. Let the eyes close. Begin with breath. Take 3 deep inhalations through the nose, letting each one fill the lungs, the belly, the sides of the rib cage, the lower back. Exhale through the mouth, slowly, allowing any surface tension to release with the breath. Now let the breath return to its natural rhythm. No manipulation, just watching. Notice the quality of the breath without changing it. Is it shallow or deep? quality matters less than the noticing. Now scan the body for any emotional residue. Move attention slowly through the chest, the throat, the belly, the solar plexus. Is there any heaviness? Any contraction? Any density that carries emotional tone? It doesn't have to be sadness specifically. Any emotional charge held in the body will work for this practice. If nothing is present, you can recall a recent moment of sadness and let the feeling tone reestablish itself gently. Locate where the feeling lives most intensely in the body. Give it your full attention. Move toward it rather than pulling back. Breathe directly into that location. Feel the edges of the sensation. How large is it? What shape does it have? Does it have texture? Color? Temperature? Now ask the feeling without forcing an answer. What do you want me to know? Wait in silence. Something may arise. An image. A memory. A wordless knowing. Or nothing may come. And that's equally valid. The asking opens something. Whether or not you receive an answer in the way the mind expects, the opening has occurred. Now begin to soften the edges of the feeling. Imagine that the density can become more permeable. The tight contraction can begin to expand outward. As you exhale, the heaviness spreads thin, becomes less solid. The feeling is still there. Continue breathing gently. With each exhalation, allowing more release. With each inhalation, bringing in spaciousness to replace what releases. Now notice what's present to this whole process. Something is watching the feeling dissolve. What is that? Turn attention toward the watching itself. Can you find a boundary to it? An edge where the watching stops and something else begins? Look carefully. Is there a center to the watching? A location you can point to and say, "Here is where I am"? Notice the quality of this open attention. Is it agitated or still? Is it burdened or light? Is it sad? The open attention itself has no sadness. It's present to sadness when sadness is present. Its own nature remains unchanged, spacious, quietly alive. This is what the teachings call your natural condition. The musician playing the instrument, hearing the music, remaining distinct from both. The music changes. The musician doesn't. Rest here for a moment. No holding any posture, no maintaining any state. Just being what you already are. Open attention, present and alive, containing whatever arises without being modified by it. When you're ready, let the eyes open slowly. Let the room come back into focus without hurry. Notice that the presence here now, looking through your eyes, is the same presence that was here a moment ago with eyes closed. It hasn't changed, only its content has changed. This is what practice shows you, seeing of what was always here, the bliss beneath the sadness, the openness beneath the contraction, the still point at the center of every storm. There's a practical question that remains. If seeing is instant, why does practice take time? If bliss is your nature, why does it feel so distant during difficult emotions? Why do you keep forgetting what you've seen? The answer lies in the structure of the nervous system. Seeing can happen in a moment. The nervous system has been conditioned over decades to operate as if you're a separate self who's vulnerable to emotional damage. Every time sadness arose and was resisted, a pathway was reinforced. Every time you identified with the contraction, neural connections strengthened. Every time the story captured attention, the habit of believing story deepened. Practice is the gradual rewiring of those patterns. The habits of forgetting are weakening. Seeing shows what was always here. The nervous system is learning to stabilize in seeing rather than collapse back into identification. This takes time because the conditioning is strong, even though the truth is simple. The tantric traditions recommend minimum periods of intensive practice for exactly this reason. 40 days is a common teaching, which corresponds to approximately what's needed for new neural pathways to establish and old pathways to weaken through disuse. If you practice the method I just guided for 15 minutes daily over the next 40 days, you'll notice cumulative shift. The baseline will move. What required effort in week 1 will become natural by week 5. The space you accessed briefly in this session will become more continuously available. The obstructions are thinning. What was always here is becoming more obvious. The final layer of teaching brings everything back to what you truly are. Sadness arises in consciousness. Joy arises in consciousness. All experience arises in consciousness. Consciousness is what you are. Therefore, everything that arises is arising in what you are, as what you are, and is made of what you are. From this angle, sadness is the divine wearing a costume. The same presence that expresses as joy, as love, as peace, occasionally wears the mask of sorrow. The mask is convincing. When you're captured by the mask, you believe the mask is your face. Practice is learning to see through the mask without needing to remove it. The sadness can continue to appear. You know what's wearing it, and that knowing changes everything. This is why Tantra includes rather than excludes, why it embraces rather than renounces. If everything is consciousness, nothing is outside the sacred. If consciousness is bliss by nature, everything that appears is bliss in form. Even the forms that feel like the opposite of bliss are still made of the same substance. Seeing this is liberation. Living from this seeing is embodied freedom. The teaching asks you to see the divinity that's already present as your humanity. The emotions that feel so personal, so problematic, so in need of fixing, are divine energy moving through divine attention, witnessed by divine presence. There's nothing to fix. There's no one who's broken. There's life living, consciousness experiencing, presence knowing itself through every possible variation of experience. You're here to see what you are even when sadness appears. That seeing transforms the sadness without fighting it. That seeing shows the bliss that was always here. That seeing is what the tantric path has pointed towards since its origins thousands of years ago, in the caves and temples of practitioners who discovered what you're discovering now. Sadness as you've known it ends tonight. The one who was drowning in it has been seen as the ocean itself, and the ocean can contain infinite waves without ever being damaged by any of them. If this teaching has served you, if something has shifted in how you understand your relationship to difficult emotions, take action on that right now. Subscribe if you haven't yet. Share this with someone who might need it. Leave a comment describing what opened up for you, what questions remain, what you'll practice tonight. The teaching continues in your life, in your practice, in the moments when sadness arises and you meet it differently than you've ever met it before. You're here for a reason. Something in you saw something in these words. That seeing is the same seeing that transforms suffering. Follow it. Trust it. Let it lead you home to what you've always been. The bliss that the tantric traditions describe is your birthright. It's what you are when you stop believing you're something else. Tonight, you've glimpsed it. Tomorrow, practice will stabilize the glimpse. Over weeks and months, the glimpse will become the ground you stand on. And from that ground, sadness will arise and pass like weather through the infinite space you are. The space remains untouched. You are that space. You always were. Welcome home.